Welcome to your weekly airplane news update. This is the week of July 19th, 2021. And this week we've got kind of a jam-packed list of news and another follow-up on what happened in Hawaii with that 737 that ditched into the water. The FAA ends up grounding TransAir, which was the operator of the aircraft, for reasons that are actually not related to the accident. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Diamond DA50 that's arriving in North America in fanfare. They actually flew all the way from Europe. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a very important topic for flight training, which is the FAA talking about prosecuting volunteer CFIs, certified flight instructors. And this is something that's been shaking the flight instruction world for quite a while, and there's an update, and we'll talk about what kind of consequences this can have. And we'll talk about the Florida man, the famous Florida man that strikes again. So let's get to it. First thing this week, the FAA grounded TransAir. TransAir was the operator for the 737 that ditched into the Pacific in Hawaii a couple weeks ago. We reported that the two pilots made it. One was in critical condition. The good news is both of them are now out of the hospital. That's a great thing. But the FAA actually grounded the company not because of the ditching of the aircraft, but this comes after a 30-day notice that the FAA gave to the company that they were going to ground or stop their maintenance program, take away their maintenance inspection authority, essentially. So the FAA says that the action is the result of deficiencies in the maintenance and safety department over there. So kind of interesting that the FAA decides that they're going to ground them 30 days down the road, and then in the meantime they have an accident where it looks like they had engine issues on takeoff. So we'll find out if the two are related. I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to talk about this. This is, I think, the fourth or third week that we talk about this topic. And but the good news is both pilots are out of the hospital and hopefully looking for a job not at this company because that's not where you want to fly. Next story this week is the first Diamond DA50 arrives in North America, in Canada. And the cool thing is they made the flight all the way from Austria, which is where Diamond is located. And the DA50 is a single-engine aircraft with retractable landing gear. The entire flight was 4,410 nautical miles. They did this over 10 different legs, 29.4 hours over 3 days. The aircraft in itself has some really cool specs. Top speed of 181 knots, 750 nautical mile range, and then a 1,200-pound useful load, which is quite a bit. So you can see pictures of the aircraft right here. This is a really interesting thing. Diamond obviously has training aircraft, single and multi-engine, a really well-made aircraft. Actually, the Diamond, the DA40, twin-engine diesel aircraft. So Diamond does things a little bit differently than other manufacturers out there for training aircraft. They decided to go with a composite design rather than metal design that we see on the Piper and on the Cessna. So really interesting company. I've flown the DA40 and then their single engine as well, and cool aircraft. All right, the next topic is kind of a big one. This is the FAA that's deciding to prosecute or possibly prosecute volunteer CFIs. And we got to kind of backtrack a little bit on this story because this is not something that came out of the clear blue sky. This is something that the FAA has been working on for quite a while. Back a few months ago, or even maybe a year ago, there's been a series of accidents related to warbirds. And the FAA kind of started looking into it and said, well, warbirds are limited, experimental, or primary category airplane. And the FAA said, well, you guys are operating under Part 91 at the moment when you provide instruction, and we don't like it. We want to move all of this away from Part 91 where it's too easy to find loopholes and move everything into Part 125 operation. So this is kind of what started this whole story. Eventually, the FAA came back and said, well, if you're going to be instructing in those aircraft, then you can't do this as a volunteer basis. And the reason is because you may not be getting actual compensation, money compensation, but the FAA is saying, well, money is not the only thing that is considered compensation. And this is, I don't know if this is something new, but this is something that they've definitely clarified this week and something that's kind of sending shockwaves throughout the industry. they're basically saying that if you accumulate flight time in one of these aircraft, even though you're not charging for compensation for instruction, it is still considered a form of compensation. So this is kind of a loophole that these companies that train in these aircraft have found. They said, well, we're not doing it for money because we're doing it voluntarily. And the FAA says, well, voluntarily doesn't mean anything to us. It means that if you're accumulating flight time, it's still a compensation. We can still go after, and you still can do it under Part 91. So the interesting part about this is that the FAA has a process. They say, hey, if you want to train in these aircraft, limited experimental primary category airplane, you can get a letter of deviation authority. It's called a LODA from the FAA. The problem is that AOPA says, the AOPA has been involved with this for a while, and they say there's such a backlog at the FAA to process these applications that it could take months, possibly even years, to get a LODA, an approval from the FAA to train in these aircraft. So everybody's kind of at a standstill at the moment. The FAA says you can't do this voluntarily. You need a LODA, and then everybody says, well, if all of us submit the application, the system is going to be bugged down, and nobody's going to be able to get approval for several months. So it's shutting down essentially any kind of training in those experimental warbirds type of airplane. And what AOPA has said, and I have to tend to agree with this, is all this is going to do, it's going to force people to go fly these aircraft illegally and possibly not getting the amount of training that they need to get in order to fly those. So it's a bit of a mess. I don't think this is the end of it. I think we'll hear more about this in the future, but we'll keep an eye on it because I think this can have more repercussion in the future on a lot of different things. Just a really interesting situation. Last story, Florida man strikes again. And this time, this is somebody who went to the U.S. Coast Guard station and basically drove through, exited their car after stopping in the hangar, and then decided to go inside of a Park C-130 and try to get in the cockpit to start the C-130. So life is not a video game, Florida man, I want to remind you. And so just every week we seem to have one of these a crazy story going on from Florida. So we're used to it now. Maybe we'll make a segment every week on Florida man. All right, that's it. That's all I have. We'll see you guys next week. As always, like, subscribe, comment, and I love to interact with you guys. And go check out the drone news update, not the airplane news update. The drone news update on our other channel. We have a bunch of cool topics. So see you guys next week.